So the thing that people discuss more than anything else with 3D printers are, what are your settings? What settings do you use? How did you get that? Whenever you see somebody print a part, they say, wow, what settings did you use? Or what slicer program did you use? So I thought it would be a good idea to go upstairs to the computer. I can record my screen and I can go through and show you each setting that I use and what it's important for and how you can adjust it based on what part you have. First, obviously, you have to know what printer you're going to use and what filament you're going to use, and then you can adjust it from there, because there is no standard answer, oh, I use this setting and this will work for you. Well, it'll only work for you if you're using their same filament and their same printer. Other than that, you have to adjust it for your filament in your printer. Let's see all the settings that we use.
So here we are at the computer, and I want to start with Cura 150406, and when you open it up it looks like this. There might be some preset numbers here, but we'll go through everything. And I wanted to start with this program for a couple reasons. First, this is the one that comes with on your micro SD card when you buy the MP Select Mini 3D printer. There is a new version of Cura that's 2.3.1, which looks like this. It's the same thing underneath, I would say, but you can optionally go in the settings and turn on many more things. We'll get to that later. You can also use Simplify3D. And I'll cover quickly some of these things later just to show you what the additional settings can do. But starting with this, the first thing you want to do is go in and bring in your STL part. Just drag it in. And that's actually kind of big, so the first thing I'm going to do is scale it down. There's rotate, scale, mirror. Rotate you use a lot because sometimes the part comes in, you'll bring it in and it'll be sitting like that, and you have to think, how am I going to print this? Where's the strength going to be? How are the lines going to be drawn? So obviously this piece wants to be drawn like that. And scale, I want to set the Z-axis to 60 and it will scale everything to that. Next, I like to, this is the home area, I like to set it somewhat in the middle but kind of toward the front. I remember that I have a glass print bed and I have a clip here and a clip here and a clip here, so I want to stay away from that, but that's a good spot. And now, as far as the settings, I've changed these, and it saves what you printed last. You can open a profile that you have saved, and I have some profiles right here that I've already saved to try to adjust things. And you can save them as Cura PLA, Cura PET, or Cura I'm having issues with, you know, stray lines, you know, whatever. So you're constantly modifying to try to get a good base settings. Another thing that you might want to do when you first start off is load profile from G-code. And like I mentioned, there are some preloaded files on your micro SD card. There's a little elephant and an alien, and you can import the settings that were used to create those for your printer. You can import them from that G-code, so you just select that and it'll bring it in. But let's go through line by line and go over everything. First is layer height, and this is adjusting this will adjust your time to print, and it will also adjust the quality, as it says right here. And when you hover over each box, it gives you the kind of a description of what it is. Most people set this between 0.1 and 0.2, and if you set it lower than 0.1, you might get better quality, but it will take a lot longer. So this depends on how good a print you want it to be. So if you want it very detailed, very intricate, you can say 0.1 and it might up the time, or you say 0.2 and it'll just zoom through it. Shell thickness, and it says this has to be a fraction of your nozzle, and nozzle is way down here. And on the Monoprice Select Mini, the nozzle is 0.4 millimeters. So you can set this to 0.4, 0.8, 1.2, 1.6, and again, that has to do with how strong you want the part to be. Most of the time what I use is 0.08, most of the time. If you want it to be very strong, I'll use 1.2. The next line is retraction. This isn't something that's very critical on PLA because it's not very runny, but with PETG, this is something that's very important. And retraction is when it prints, as it moves, it will pull that filament back so you don't get all the stringy lines. So I always have retraction on. And there's actually another setting. I don't really change this all that much. This is all preset. There's another, on the advanced settings, there's retraction, speed, and distance. So we'll get to that. Fill for the bottom and top thickness. Again, it's a factor of the nozzle. Other programs will use layers. So you can say, I want it, 2 layers thick. Cura uses an actual distance. So again, 0.08 is fine. Fill density. This is, again, how strong you want the part to be. If I think it's preset at 20%, and that will give a square grid, maybe a 1/4 inch or maybe a little smaller, 1/8 of an inch grid. I've printed a part at 80%, and it looked almost completely full, and it took a long time to print. So if you want to print something extremely strong, you can go 70, 80%. If it's a small part, you can do 100%, but it's going to take time and it's going to use a lot of filament. I haven't seen any reason to go above 50. I have to note something is wrong with this version of Cura. It's not updating the time, but every time you change a number, this number should change here, but I'm having problems with this version, which is why I've moved up to the newest one. Print speed. This is one of the most critical things you'll adjust. This will greatly increase or reduce your print time and your accuracy. So if you want something very accurate, you might set this layer to 0.1, and you might set the print speed to 20 millimeters per second. A good baseline is 40. If you want it to go really quick, you can pick 60. It says you can go up to 150. I've never gone above 60. You could try it if you really don't care, if it's just a part a mechanical part or something that you're not a detailed part like this. Temperature. This is another critical one that you want to fine tune for the filament you're using. So if you're using PLA, it'll say right on the roll, print between 190 and 200 or 200 and 210. So just pick a number in between, and if you notice it's a little runny or stringy, or every time it moves, you're getting those little strings, you can lower it. Now, there's a lot more to talk about that, which includes bonding between the layers. You don't want it too cold, or else you won't get the bonding between the layers, and it might clog the nozzle. And too runny, the downfall of that is you're going to get those stringy artifacts. But these two things, speed and temperature, are things you're always going to be adjusting all the time. Even if you have a baseline, you're going to go in and say, oh, this needs to be more accurate. Let's make this 30. And the density's 50. That's too much. Let's make it 40. And let's make this more accurate at 30. And you know what? It was a little too stringy, so let's try 215. And like I said, they have some tips right in there, 210 and for PLA and things like that. Bed temperature. My printer does have a heated bed. It goes up to 80 degrees Celsius, but a good starting point is 50. And like I said before, I use a heated bed on everything, even PLA, just to help get that first layer to stick. Support type. Now, I do everywhere because there's another setting where it touches the build plate, but some prints you might have an overhang over an existing part, and if you just say touching the build plate, it will not put the structure there. So I like to say everywhere. So even if there's let's say a character's foot and above it is his arm, everywhere will print the foot, then it'll print that support structure, and then print the arm. And the support structure you can snap off. And again, you can click the 3 dots, and there's the different. I've never adjusted this. The lines is fine with me. It goes pretty quickly, and you can just snap it right off. And you can adjust all the different settings for just the support structure. I like to do a brim. I've never done a raft. They say that will print a base and then print your part above that. I've never found the need to do that. I like a brim because, like I've mentioned before, that will start printing. It'll get the filament flowing. I can rip that off and make sure it's printing cleanly before the actual part prints. I usually print 5. I think the initial setting is 10. I found that was way too much, so 5 is fine. Other programs like the new Cura or Simplify3D you can have an offset, and you can say how many rows or distance. So it's the same thing, just a little bit different wording. Filament diameter 1.75, never changed that. Flow, I've never changed this flow, but there is a setting later on that you can change. You can up the flow of the first layer to kind of really pump out the filament, and I do change that. And again, nozzle size, you set that and don't touch it. So that's all for the basic. On to advanced. Here's that retraction, speed and distance. So it's how fast it's pulling back the filament and how far it's pulling it back. So some material, you have to tweak this a lot. So there's ColorFab's Engine and PETG. Some of those stringy materials, if you don't get this setting dialed in, you're going to get blobs or stringy lines. So there's lots of talk about how high you should set it, how fast you should pull it back, but you don't want to be pulling too far back, or you're pulling that hot filament back up into the extruder and it can jam. I've seen people set this as high as 108, 8 millimeters. Some people set it as low as 1 and 20. That's, if you have a material that's not very stringy and doesn't need to be retracted that much. So if it's a PLA, you might go with 2.5 and 30. If you know it's going to print fine and it's a good PLA, that should be fine. But if you have a stringier material like a PETG and things like that are going to be runny, or those very rubbery filaments that really extrude out there, you're going to want to retract that a lot and very quickly. Now for quality, this is where you get into the first layer, that first layer adhesion. And I don't touch the layer thickness, but I do change the initial layer width. And that is just a way, like I said, to get more filament out there and really make sure it sticks to that print bed. So that's really the only thing I adjust there. Speed, you could set the speed of, we have this speed here, the print speed, but there's other speeds like travel speed. And again, I set that as high as it'll go, 150. That's the most for my printer. But on the first layer, again, I have it set for 20. So that first layer that it prints, I want it to print slowly and really get good adhesion. I don't want it to zip around that first layer and pry off. Again, infill speed, I want it to print faster because I don't care on the quality of infill. I could even make that higher. Top and bottom speed, I have that set for the same, although, like I said, the bottom will print slower. So this is only, I guess, for the top speed. And now you can say outer shell speed. There's 2 layers for the shell. You'll have the inner shell and outer shell. So I have this set low because I was trying to print something at 10 that I really wanted to print nicely on the outspeed. I was getting globs. So you can set the outer shell speed to 30 if you want, and the inner to 40. So now we have, it's going to print, we'd say everything for 40, and we'd have the infill faster, the bottom layer slower, the outer shell would be the same as your print speed. So you can tweak all these things, and the way you tweak them is you say, okay, everything worked fine, but I want the outer shell to be a little cleaner. So that's where you would, lower this down a little. So you're constantly, this is just a baseline you're starting with, and you're constantly changing it, and you're saving this. So once you have it, you're going to go in and save profile right here, and you save all these settings. So next time you do it, you can load it back up. Or for each different filament, you would save this as, PLA high quality, or PETG fast or low quality, or things like that. On to cool. Minimum layer time, this is if, I haven't really had a need or an issue with this. This is if you have a small layer and it won't print, it'll wait before going to the next layer to let it cool. Enable cooling fan. I have this on, and I have this at 100%. And one time I tried to set it to 50 so that I didn't want it to cool as quickly. And what happened was the filament started to get hot up in the extruder. There's a heat sink on the extruder up in it, and I had it at 50%, and that filament started to melt. When I pulled it out, it was all melted, and it clogged the extruder when I set it to 50% for, the first few layers, or I forget what I changed. So from then on, I've always had it at 100%, and I haven't had any issues with clogging, knock on wood. So these are the basic settings. Plugins are things you can add and things you can add code, and you can add these other things like turn the fan off or start at a different spot or move. I haven't had to adjust any of that. I haven't found the need for it. But so these are the basic settings in 1504. When you learn all that, you get very comfortable with that. Then you can go to Cura 2.3 and you drag in that same chess piece. Now, initially it doesn't come with all these. It'll come with, recommend, it'll look like this. And you can say, just click on a few things and say normal quality and let it go. And it might be fine for you. Or you can just say high quality or low quality and it'll change it for you. Or you can go into custom, and these aren't all set at first. You have to go into settings, and I believe it's manage profile, and you turn on, right here, you click and you turn on what you want to see. So I don't have initial layer height turned on, but if I wanted to change it, you click it here and it shows up right there. So it's right there and you can turn it on and off. So I don't change that. I don't change all these things that I have turned off, so I didn't touch them. I don't care about the top or bottom pattern, but infill density, I think that's pre-checked, and you want that because you want it, you want that turned on. Now pattern and things like that, I haven't had to use. So you'll go through, and once you learn more about it, you can turn all these things on. There's, the infill speed, the wall speed, all those other things. And you get it to where you can change even more things than 15. Again, this came when I couldn't get a part to print correctly on the basic settings. Now I had to come in and you can prime the extraction to where it's pulling the filament back before it gets to the end so you don't get a glob. I was getting all these globs on my part. It was actually this one right here. I don't know if I could show it to you. But I was getting all these globs on this printed chess piece, and I wanted to prime it so that it was retracting before it got to the end. And you can set, there's things like where you're flowing, you're brushing over. I'll try to find the word for it. There's a combing, where it'll keep moving and it'll keep flowing. So you try not to get the glob. So you're noticing problems and you're saying, okay, you'll go onto Google and say, hey, I'm getting these globs on my part. And people will say, oh, try to turn combing on, or, try this, or try to pre-retract, your prime your retract speed and things like that. So these are all these additional things that you learn later on, and you can tweak and get better and better prints. So the coasting is another one. Enable coasting to where it's not stopping and you're getting that glob and moving on. It's going to try to coast through it. So these are all the things that I tried to adjust to try to get rid of that. So this is the new Cura. And again, you can rotate it and move it just like before. And initially, maybe I should go over that. When I initially set it up, there's no machine for Monoprice Select Mini. So I just picked one, and it said 200, 200, 200, and I had to go in and change it 120, 120, 120, heated bed, and everything else I kept the same. But that's why on this new Cura it shows kind of what the actual print bed looks like, but this is not for my machine. My machine wasn't in here. So there'll be one for Ultimaker, and it'll have a big Ultimaker behind it, but you can just pick any one and then adjust those settings. And then for Simplify3D, again, same thing. You drag your part in. You can scale it over here on the right, I believe. Again, you can change this to 60. I don't know if you can type it in, but you can just scale it. It all has the same things. You can change your view by, You're panning when you right click. You're rotating when you hold and left click, zoom with the wheel. They're all basically the same. I think this one you're rotating with right click, you know, and you can right click on it and snap to center and all these things. But so they all do the same basic things. In Cura, you go, or sorry, in Simplify3D, you go to Edit Process Settings. This is where you're editing all your settings here. And again, this has a lot, and you go through and you, this is where you're saving your profile as. So I tried to say, you know, chess test, I'm using NGen filament, I'm using Simplify3D version 2, I'm using, you know, you can set your material, your quality, and that'll give you a base. And then you can go through, you set your infill right here, and then you go through all these tabs and you're doing the same thing. There's that wipe and coasting, which are more advanced features. And then there's the, you know, your layer height. So it has all the same things, but it's in a different way. Again, here it says top solid layer, so it doesn't have a distance. It doesn't have 0.8 millimeters. Now it has 2 layers of filament. So it's a little bit different. It's what your preference is. Again, here's the brim. You can turn the brim on and off. Infill, support. So there's all these different settings, and most of them you don't need. You'll just learn as you go along. Temperature, cooling, just everything. There's the scripts you can add. So this one is very advanced, and you probably don't need it when you're starting out. And in fact, you definitely don't need it when you're starting out. When you're starting out, this is all you want. You want this on basic and advanced. And you want to import something you know works, and then when it doesn't work, you say, huh, how can I make it better? Oh, let's try to change this. What did that change? And everybody says you should always change one thing at a time. So if you don't like the way it's printing, change it from 40 to 20 and see how it looks. Or change it from 0.1 to 0.2 and see how it looks. And that can be tough to do when it takes, you know, so find a good test piece. People say print a 20 millimeter cube. Print that 10 times until you get that cube to print perfectly. Or print a cylinder. And I like this chess piece because a cylinder shape is much more difficult to print because it'll create that G code and it'll stop. So maybe that's a good thing to bring up now. You go to File and you go to Save G code. So we'll go Open with Notepad, and you can see that G code, it has some information in the beginning where it's telling, you know, telling the printer what to do. This is what the G code looks like. You're telling it a location, X, a Y, and a Z, a point to go to, and at what speed and at what temperature. So so you take this, you export your G code, you put it on your micro SD card, and you put it in your printer, and you hit print. And we've already gone over all that, and you hope it comes out, and you look at it, and then you come back in and you adjust this. So that was I was going to say it was a quick walkthrough, but it took quite a while. So hopefully you have this all figured out, and you're constantly learning like I am. I'm constantly tweaking things and seeing what printed wrong and how I can adjust it. So let me know what you think, what your favorite tips are in terms of settings and things that you change. And like I said, everyone has their own favorite slicer program. I like Cura because that's kind of what I started with, and this Simplify3D can be a little overkill, I think. I don't use half of this. It's kind of like Photoshop. You know, there's a million things you can do on Photoshop, and I do about 3 of them. So I like to definitely start with the basic one when I can, and when I need to do some more tweaking, I go into this new one and I adjust from there. So good luck.
Well, I hope you liked the video you just watched. If you did, feel free to subscribe by clicking the button on this side. You can also check out all the videos I've done, the playlist from things I've built, things I've fixed, home repair, 3D printing, and on this side you can check out a recommended video similar to the one you just watched. And as always, down in the description I'll put a link to my blog, which has more pictures and more information about the video you just watched. Thanks.